Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? All right, so we're getting back to this little storyline that's going on in Uncanny X-Men. The kind of thing that would happen fairly often under Chris Claremont, where you do either 3 or 4 issues, maybe 2, doesn't matter. Only this one, of course, would have lasting consequences for the X-Men, particularly from this issue, which is the climax of the storyline. So let's get into Uncanny X-Men number 227. But just before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, if you feel like you might want to help out a little bit, go over and subscribe on my Patreon. It gives you early access to everything I do, helps out the channel, and helps to buy new comics. All right, so all sorts of stuff going on in X-Men right now. But the big thing is the X-Men are down in Dallas dealing with a trickster god, essentially, who has ripped a giant hole in the sky over part of the city, particularly over Forge's Eyrie, which was the building where he'd have his lab up in the top of the tower there. And in the area that's affected by this rip in the sky, there's all sorts of weird stuff going on with like time shifting and creatures and people from other times kind of teleporting in. And the X-Men have managed to fight their way to the tower, and now they're going to try and ascend to the top there, because they're under the impression that they should be able to fix things once they get there. And speaking of Forge was locked away in like a little pocket dimension with Storm for like a year, I think it was. A pocket dimension that was created by that same trickster god. And eventually he was able to come up with a way to get them back to our world. And just before he did that, he also got Storm her powers back, because she'd been going for a few years without any powers. So everyone is coming together at the top of the tower here. We're going to have us a big old climax. And I think we're heading for a big change in the status quo. So let's get started with the cover here. All right. It seems like a good concept when you think about it. And then you execute it. It's like, well, it kind of looks like they all just got tossed from an explosion or something. There's some slightly weird flight poses going on. Like, I don't know what Longshot's doing. Colossus has got the full Superman. And every time Silvestri draws Colossus on the cover, he just draws him in his underwear. He never gets like that in the comic, or hasn't so far anyway. And leading the charge is Storm, with her powers and everything. So that's pretty cool. This looks like it was a pretty quickly done cover. There's a lot of pretty sketchy lines in here, largely in like mostly with Storm and the lightning and all that. But I mean, again, if you're 10, like you're probably all over that. All right, so Dallas, Vegas, Eagle Plaza. The night of the end of the world. So as the X-Men entered Eagle Plaza, an explosion went off. You probably don't remember because it was kind of crammed in the back of the last issue. Last issue had a whole lot of comic going on in it. This one I think is a bit more reasonable. So this is the van that the reporter and the cameraman had kind of staked out. Cameraman also went in with the X-Men, just to clarify. The Chris Claremont looking cameraman. And the reporter is like just all beside herself, because she can't do anything about it. Everybody figures the X-Men are dead right off the bat. But they're actually getting a signal from the cameraman. They can't broadcast to him, but they can see at least what the X-Men are seeing. So, and, verify that the X-Men are still alive. So what are the X-Men seeing? Vietnam with Viet Cong soldiers versus demons. And there's no real explanation for it at this time, though we will get one shortly. So just a moment of confusion while the X-Men kind of sit there and go, what the hell? This was not expected. And one of those pretty good group shots that Marc Silvestri is like just particularly good at, where he gives you like layers, he gives you different kinds of depth, all sorts of stuff going on here. But your eye follows it along very nicely, actually. That's some impressive stuff. And I mean, I'm always kind of impressed by how guys like Marc Silvestri and Jim Lee can do what are probably pretty small figures in terms of the drawing, but still make them look so loose. Okay, so since this is the beginning of the issue, we're gonna get a roll call. This is the big climactic point for this storyline, so you should know who all the players are. So they introduce the X-Men here, and they go through them one by one. There's Colossus, Wolverine. Everybody gets like a decent shot at least. Although the Wolverine one, the face got a little messed up. These drawings are also extremely quick. But then this one here must have taken a ton of time. So it feels like, yeah, he poured everything in here, and here he kind of dashed off. But Marc Silvestri dashing stuff off always kind of works anyway. Like look how fluid shit like that looks. So yeah, get some Havoc too. It's weird to think of Havoc on the X-Men. I was never really reading it when he was. I just know that he was on there occasionally. All right, we got Psylocke and Dazzler. Dazzler still has Destiny's mask stuck on her face with a magic dagger, but Psylocke is kind of helping her out telepathically so that she can kind of see, which is neat. Although at the end of the last issue, Madeline Pryor said she was going to be Dazzler's eyes, which feels like it was just an excuse to kind of get her in here at the end. Then we got Longshot doing Longshot things, stabbing demons and giggling. And Rogue, who's just flying through like a frickin' wrecking ball and just getting her costume shredded panel by panel. We're not quite going to reach Savage Land levels, but, Sylvester's going to bring us close. And, they're kind of tearing through the demons pretty well here, except for, it is demons, and they're not sure of the source, and, I think they keep coming. And, yeah, Madeline Pryor, so now that her job has been usurped by Psylocke, who's much better at it, which is always a drag, is just kind of trying to climb off to the side and not get herself killed, which is probably the smartest thing in this case. And she manages to find a spot nobody else has noticed yet, where there's a bunch of dead American soldiers and what looks like Forge, only it's a very young Forge. And it starts sucking up like energy from the American bodies. So it feels like soul energy. And of course, Forge is, he's the inventor guy, but he also has this magic side where he's like a shaman. So it's an interesting mix of tech and magic. And what's happened is this is flashing back on when Forge was in Vietnam. And his whole unit, except him, was killed by VC. And in his, rage, he used his shamanistic abilities to use all of their souls in a summoning spell, which summoned a shit ton of, who then tore through all of the Viet Cong. But it also began the problem that kind of ended up with the terror in the sky. So I think that also released the trickster demon. I'm not sure if they say it specifically. There's a lot of words in these comics, all right? I might have missed a couple. And yeah, so the demons run through the VC and it seems like tears them apart. It's mostly done off panel, but we're not really seeing it because this is, a PG, maybe PG-13-ish comic. So we just get Forge's oblique references. Like imagery, charnel pit, obscenity, killing ground. Wanted them to pay, but not like this, So now he's already immediately feeling regret. And I think he's trying to basically clean up his own mess. So he calls into his base and requests an arc light, which is a signal for the B-52s, which is Strato Fortress, I knew that, to fly on his position and just dump ordnance all over the valley. And obviously Forge is going to survive, but I think the implication here anyway is that, so the end result was utter and complete devastation. So basically no evidence of what has happened. They turned the entire valley into ash, including American soldiers, Viet Cong, and demons. Strato Fortresses are very handy. All right, so we cut from there to Roma's house, which is basically this big flying palace that's kind of in orbit, or pretty close to. And this is the trickster god, so he's taken over the body of Naze, who's Forge's old teacher, actually, who taught him the shamanistic ways, which is something I keep meaning to mention, but keep forgetting about. And he's got himself some prisoners. He's got Roma, Forge, and Storm. So when they came in to our reality from the little pocket dimension that the trickster god had created for them, he was able to snatch them up pretty quickly and just kind of stash them in Roma's fortress here. And apparently the point of putting Storm and Forge in that little reality was to give them an opportunity to basically create a new civilization, because he's going to end the old one. So this is a big old end of the world threat going on here. And I guess as sort of a thank you for letting him do that, he was going to let Forge live and just, suffer eternal grief, I suppose. And he's just kind of taunting them, because he doesn't have much else to do at this point. He's just kind of waiting for the X-Men to get themselves killed so that he can, I guess, get on with his plan. He's going to have to summon some demons to do that. But the rip has been widening, so there is that. He may just be waiting for that to be opening further. And it seems like it's a little bit of a stalemate while they just wait for things to just degenerate. But Roma seems to think that things are still going somewhat to plan. And Roma is the defender of this reality, if I haven't said so this video already. So that's probably a good thing. All right, so back outside of Eagle Tower, where all they can really do is monitor the camera, and they're broadcasting to just about everybody and telling about what they just saw. So, I mean, kind of the world knows about what happened in Vietnam with Forge. And the camera guy tries to interview Wolverine, and it doesn't go very well. He's just like, get that flaming lens out of my face, bub. Not really the best shot of Wolverine. It feels like we're still getting to a point where Mark Silvestri can come up with some really badass shots of him. I'm pretty sure we're going to get there, though. And instead of that being the end of it, the cameraman keeps arguing his position. There's this Chris Claremont-looking face, saying that you guys are always complaining about how humanity misunderstands you. Well, this is your opportunity for them to kind of see you in action and, get your point of view. So, just let me do my thing, and you guys might actually benefit from this. And Havoc's on board. And when it comes to the panel count, it feels like we're easing up a little bit. Not a ton. Yeah. We're getting 6 or 7 per page instead of 12. I'm not quite sure if that holds up. It seems to be. It's more mid-sized panels. So I can't imagine Mark has figured out how to operate a Claremont script just yet, because that would be extremely quick, but it feels like he's making some progress at least. So now they've made it through this kind of vision featuring Forge. They're at the top of the tower, and they're just like, okay, so now what? And Psylocke is able to detect the real Forge's thoughts, as well as Storm's, and two beings of just immense power. And she's able to pinpoint the location as Roma's fortress. So since Rogue can fly and is super durable, she's going to be the one to scout the place out. She just tries to go straight up there, but the place is protected because when the trickster god was taunting Storm and Rogue, Storm tried to retaliate with her lightning and wind powers, which as a god he was able to harness, and now he's using it as a protective barrier, just a tornado around the fortress, and sends Rogue crashing back to Earth. It does look like it's pretty much in orbit too, yeah. Right down where they were, at least. I mean, hell, you could hit anywhere in North America, really, from there, probably. And giant impact crater. Well, not even an impact crater, just the skid as, she just hits at an angle, which is great. I love the texture in here to the shadowing. It's a little Buscemi, which is the style, Silvestri started trying to emulate. But Storm's fine. She's just, she's a bit busted up, and her suit is even more torn up than usual, so they can't really help her up because there's too much of a risk of, skin-to-skin contact, and then she'll just, put them in a coma for a while. So they know they can't just fly into the Citadel. So they had to come up with some kind of alternative. And Wolverine's the man in charge. He's the one leading the X-Men in the absence of Rogue, and it's up to him to come up with a plan. I don't think he has anti-hurricane plans. And Dazzler, with the no-eyes mask stuck to her face with a magic knife, goes, hey, what about Longshot? Because Longshot has hollow bones, like a bird. So they figure, why don't we use Longshot kind of like a kite? And we just kind of fly him up there, and with his luck powers, it'll probably end up getting him where he needs to go. And everyone's kind of like, that's ridiculous. But they don't have another plan, so they're going to have to try the Longshot kite gambit. It's way back in the back of the playbook. And Longshot, of course, is all for it. Because just like any situation where he can help the X-Men, he's like, yeah! It's the 80s when the guy with the mullet is the cool one in the group. I think Longshot was the cool one for a little while. Certainly made an impression on Rob Liefeld anyway. And last, the camera guy asks Madeline why she's here. And she's like, well, you don't have to be a mutant to believe in the dream of mutants and humans living together and yada, yada, yada. Which is in theme for Fall of the Mutants, which is just kind of about how humanity hates mutants. And yeah, more of these 6-panel layouts, which are pretty good and give Mark Silvestri a little bit of room to breathe and give Chris Claremont a little bit of room to pipe in a whole bunch of dialogue. It's interesting to see him break up what should be one paragraph into 3 or 4 word balloons to just fit them around all the characters. And maybe the main problem with these 6-panel layouts is you never get a big impressive shot. So far, the only one we've really gotten was that one on page 2 and 3 that went across the top. It was a pretty good one, though. All right, so Rogue is going to basically be the one manning the kite string. She flies up, and with her super strength, she pulls up Longshot and flings him into the tornado. And he goes, yahoo! And so everybody else has to grab a hold of the line here. Even the cameraman, even though he'd really like to not do that and just kind of run away. He's kind of got enough footage by now, right? But then you miss the ending. If you get a chance to get the end, you gotta take that chance. So yeah, everybody grabs the line. Colossus is the first one holding the line, because just in his armored form, he kind of weights everything down. So switches to his human form and probably gets his friggin' arms dislocated as they all get yanked along by Longshot here. And of course, immediately, Longshot is able to get through the hurricane and land safely. It doesn't say exactly how he brings the rest of them up, because like Longshot's supposed to weigh like 75 pounds. He can't really weight them. Maybe he ties it off to somewhere. So he sees, the three people chained to the wall, which is Stormforge and Roma. And then he sees one other dude who is not chained to the wall. He goes, that must be the bad guy. I better throw knives at him. And the knives actually hurt the demon, which seems silly, but it's about the material. So it's iron. So this is kind of linked to like fairy lore, because it's cold iron is injuring him. So that's something. So they've knocked him off balance right off the bat. Rogue comes in next and goes for a big old smooch, because that's always how she has to absorb powers, right? At least back in this day. And she's absorbing as much as she can, but it's just kind of endless. Although it is kind of just desiccating him here, which is pretty cool. And then Wolverine leaps in an interesting panel layout and just yells at her to get it out of the way. But yeah, we've been kind of sticking with, our grids all the way down, and then something kind of imagey, where it's just an open panel and, right at the bottom here. Nice swoopy action shot. Still not a lot of drawing to it, though, which is, good for Mark, right? And I gotta say, there's a fair amount of detail in all of this stuff. Like, this does not look like Mark Silvestri going at double speed. This is just regular how Mark Silvestri draws. So he's got no problem with the monthly schedule. Particularly probably when he's like 26, 27 around here. So Wolverine swoops in and takes a big swipe at the demon here, but adamantium is not the same as cold iron, which I was wondering, but no, not quite. So Wolverine is effectively useless in this fight, except for being, fairly sturdy. So when the demon just knocks him flying, at least he'll survive. And, just good action shot for everybody just flying out of the way. He managed to hit both of them with the same shot, I think. So Colossus comes flying in last, and he notes that Longshot's blades had an effect, and he's like, maybe, because the blades are a steel alloy, then maybe my steel form would be useful. Which doesn't seem right with the cold iron thing, but maybe, steel is close enough to cold iron? I feel like I don't know enough about metallurgy to read this comic. So yeah, switches to his metal form, and the demon says, you're not supposed to be part of this game, which I'm not sure what that means. Like, I don't think I've seen any point where Colossus was meant to be kind of set aside. Maybe he was, separated from the rest of the group at a crucial point, or, he was incapacitated for a short... that didn't happen in these last couple of issues. So I'm not really sure what that would mean. But when he cuts through, he really cuts through. He just plows right through the demon in the stolen body. And essentially, cuts him in half. This is pretty goopy. That's a pretty cool panel. Very foreshortened arm here. And just Mark having fun drawing, what essentially adds up to gore. And basically what that ends up doing is destroying the host body that he'd been using. So now he's forced to show his true form, which is just this gigantic Balrog looking thing. And the new universe is still limping along. I don't think for too much longer. I vaguely remember reading an issue or two of DP7 when I was in elementary school, and thinking it was kind of cool how they were minor league super people. They didn't have very good powers, but they were, more like characters, from what I recall. Okay, so, the trickster here kind of chides Roma for stacking the deck by sneaking in a ringer. Again, the whole thing with Colossus, just I'm not sure how he's a ringer, but sure, he's an X-Man. You wanted the X-Men? Here, X-Man. He's an X-Man! And Rogue gets a chance to shine, because when she absorbed all that stuff from the trickster god while he was in Naze's body, she ended up absorbing Naze, essentially. So at least for the moment, she has access to his shamanistic abilities. And what she's able to do is open up a portal to send the demon back. But while she's able to open up a portal, she doesn't have enough power to actually push him through it. But with him in the portal, his hold on the Citadel is weakening. So the prisoners are able to get loose at least, which is a little all right, so he used magic, I guess. That would, okay, that makes some sense. I'm okay with that. And now everyone gets to take a turn at trying to hammer the demon just through the portal, just like force him through. Starting with Storm, who's going to hit him with all sorts of lightning and winds, but doesn't do anything. And you get Dazzler and Havoc kind of teaming up. Again, completely ineffectual. And the demon's just kind of stuck in the opening of the portal here. And sooner or later, the thing's going to close, and the demon won't be on the other side. So they're going to have to deal with him at that point. And at that, at that point, they're just going to lose. And Roma, it seems, can't really interfere here, but she can advise, which is, okay. But she doesn't seem to be able to actually take direct action against him. I guess he didn't take, he just kind of imprisoned her. I don't know, that's somewhat direct. All right, so yeah, she mentions that magic can hurt him. So while Rogue has done all she can with the magic she was able to get from, I guess, Naze's corpse, there is somebody else here who can do some magic, which is Forge. I mean, he started this. And at first, he kind of just flat out refuses to do this, because this would be like his great shame kind of thing, right? Which the demon kind of exults in, because Forge not saving the world because then he'll look like an asshole, like he's on board for that. And I do like how, Mark Silvestri is doing a pretty good job of giving us our money's worth in terms of rendering. But when it comes to actually designing the demon, it's just like, he's a big black shape. It's good enough. I need to save some time on something. It still looks cool. And they kind of grasp what the scope of the spell would have to be. Because originally the spell was conjured up by using the 9 souls of his fallen comrades. So that's kind of what he's going to have to do to close it. He's going to have to use 9 souls that are willingly given. And what do you know? We have 9 souls here. We've got 8 X-Men and 1 Madeline Pryor. And the newsman gets left out, and he's like, yep, sure, no problem. They try to leave Madeline out. It's like, no, we need that 9th one. Sorry. And it can't be Forge, because he has to be the one to stick around to cast it. So everyone's just like, oh, so we're just all going to die now. But the world gets saved, so I guess that's pretty good. All right, they all say their goodbyes. Madeline says like a goodbye to Scott on camera, which is like, oof. Because I'm pretty sure around this time, Scott's like completely ignoring her, so that he can just go like play with Jean, now that she's been resurrected. The whole thing with Jean just turns the Scott-Madeline relationship just really gross. Like, they were such a cute couple in that From the Ashes storyline. And they looked like they were really going somewhere. And just like, oh yeah, but now it's turned out that Cyclops is incredibly selfish. Like, abandon your family selfish. And she really was just a replacement for Jean all along. Anyway, Forge casts a spell, which like essentially vaporizes the X-Men. And he makes this like star-looking thing, which he flings at the demon. And it totally works because it's supposed to, which is good, because there's no X-Men around in case that failed. The demon is shoved through the portal, and then the gates are closed and like sealed like permanently. Because that's what that spell's designed to do. And yet, so now, effectively at this time, the X-Men are dead, live on camera. No real like sleight of hand, not at this time anyway. Like legitimately dead. And so we're going to cut to Muir Island, where Shadowcat is actually watching the TV, and she gets to see the X-Men's last moments. So that's fun. Shadowcat's been on the team for like 5-6 years by now. Like, you'd think she should be a little bit older by now, I would think. Whatever, though. But she gets called down to the infirmary because apparently Nightcrawler is okay. Nightcrawler was injured at some point. I don't know. I missed that completely. But she gets to break the bad news that, oh yeah, all our buddies are dead. All right, so cut back to Dallas, where the rip in the sky has been sealed up. So all of the weird shenanigans have been dispelled. The crisis is now over. And Forge and the cameraman get teleported back. I'm not sure if by Roma or by Forge. It seems like by Forge. I guess he's still got his magic. And Forge just kind of walks on out of there. Freedom Force is there because they were originally fighting him. And Mystique just cusses him out the whole way, just calling him a murderer. And he's like, I couldn't be a part of it. I would have gone with him if I could. Cool shot to end on. Very basic, like very basic silhouettes. But decent enough. Again, very small figures. So now we're going to cut back to the Citadel, where Roma is casting some magic stuff on that padlock that was put on the demon's dimension. And from it, she's able to resurrect the X-Men, because their souls were what was keeping it closed. And at first, they're like, what, did the spell not work? And like, no, it worked, but this gate shouldn't be locked permanently. It's a balance thing. It's order and chaos. You know, it's good that he's in his dimension for now, but he should be able to come out so that we can do this again sometime. And we're not ending the series on 227. That's a weird number for that. And she basically offers to the X-Men, you know what, I'll put you wherever you want. And now you're no longer persecuted by the humans because they all think you're dead. Which is like, oh, cool, we kind of won then. Kind of sucks that like all our friends and relatives think we're dead too. Of course, if everybody thinks we're dead, then that includes villains, so they probably won't attack our friends and relatives. So it still kind of works in our favor. So this turns into a needs of the many outweighs the needs of the few or the one. And we get a medium-sized panel for a team shot to end on, where you can almost make out facial features. Not quite, but it's still a cool shot. And so next issue is going to be A New Beginning Down Under. So this is the beginning of the Outback era for the X-Men. But that is the end of issue 227. So regarding the story on this, it is pretty good. It feels a little bit like a bait and switch, or it could have been. I'm not for sure if that was the case. I don't know enough about the marketing at the time. If they build this as the death of the X-Men, then yeah, you got swindled. If that wasn't the case and it was just sort of down to the foreshadowing that was in the context of the story, that's perfectly all right. Although they didn't exactly go super dramatic with the deaths of the X-Men, so I don't know how convincing that would have been. And, you know, it only lasted for a page or two. But aside from that, this is a pretty packed storyline. Kind of. The first part of it is kind of aimless. You know, it's more of a setting the stage kind of thing. It's all really in the second and third issue, where there's a whole ton of stuff that happens all at once, and I'll bet that's pretty memorable for a lot of people. So yeah, that is the end of that 3-issue arc, which, like I said, has far-reaching consequences for this book. So now the X-Men are, you know, presumed dead by the world at large, and they're going to go live in Australia for, I'm not even sure. I'm thinking it's at least a year. It may be longer. But in addition, we've got Storm back, and Storm has her powers. So again, just kind of a reshuffling of the deck. It's not quite a reset to factory settings. We've got some characters that, you know, last time there was this many people in the group and Storm was in there. You know, guys like Longshot and Havoc weren't part of it. But, you know, we got some new guys in there. We got some old guys mixed in. This is an interesting group going forward. And so next time we do an Uncanny X-Men book, we'll be starting off the Outback era. And that'll be interesting because I've never seen that stuff, and I've heard a bunch about it, and a lot of people seem to like it, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. But that's going to do it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notifications so you know when the next one's coming out. Go over and subscribe on my Patreon. It gives you early access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff to the YouTube videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, as well as some Patreon-exclusive content. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions, and you can join the Blood Force Discord server. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.